I finished Bloodborne. I played it 3 times just to see all 3 different endings of this game. I played the DLC. Now I'm currently playing through the Chalice Dungeons. And I'm planning to go for the Platinum Trophy for this game. At this point, I pretty much witnessed most of the things Bloodborne has to offer. So here's the question. What can I say about this game? Is this the fan favorite of the Soulsborne games? Is this game a masterpiece? Is this a horror slash action adventure game? I mean, I don't have many negative things to say about this game. I have praise for this game, sure. However, I do have some criticism too. Soulsborne games are one of my favorites. I, for one, always like to play hard games and get raged while I'm at it. It's a hate-love thing for me. So, a bit of a history before coming back to Bloodborne. I finished Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, and Elden Ring. Those 3 topics are for another time. But my point is, I'm someone who is familiar with the Soulsborne genre. I can't actually say what grabs my attention to it. Is it the world setting, the combat mechanics, the character who are in these stories, the music, the boss battles? I suppose all these factors complement one another to deliver this kind of genre. In Dark Souls, it was all about delaying the inevitable. Gwyn rekindling the flame, which temporarily restores power and order, but also perpetuates suffering and prolong an endless cycle. In Sekiro, the wolf takes on an entire clan's might to rescue his young master and sever the bonds of immortality that curses them both. In Elden Ring, the Tarnished fights and journeys through these war-ravaged lands. But this world can be saved and ushered into a new age. There is still hope for the future. So, coming back to my question, what can I say about Bloodborne? Everything I do, does it mean anything? Are there other things in motion I can't put my finger on it? Or is it all just a dream? All the other games in this genre do provide a huge amount of lore to understand what's going on, but not in Bloodborne. So from here on out, I'll talk about my experience playing Bloodborne. It ain't gonna be about the lore of this game. However, I'm fascinated by it. This video will be about the player who's playing Bloodborne for the first time, but familiar with the Souls games. When I started the game, I understood there is something called the Pale Blood, and a contract is made so that my character becomes a hunter. Not much to go on, and a lot of it is shrouded in mystery. And after the character creation, I woke up, and instead of choosing violence, I went back to sleep. I spawned at the Hunter's Dream that acts like a hub area of the game. Here I get to choose which weapon shall I pick. I went with the saw cleaver and the pistol. Why? I chose the saw cleaver largely because of its prominence. It is showcased in the trailers, it is featured on the physical game cover, and even appeared in the main menu. It felt like the natural choice, almost as if the weapon Bloodborne itself wanted me to use. So after dealing with that wolf, I arrived at Central Yanam. Here I get to test out how the game really feels and plays out. So let's start with the basics of the combat in Bloodborne. Right hand weapons are for melee combat, offering variety of attacks, light attacks, heavy attacks, running attack, plunging attack, and charge attacks. Charge attacks takes longer to execute but can deal significant damage and even stagger enemies under the right conditions. Left-hand weapons, typically the firearms, serves a dual purpose, range damage and parrying. Parrying in Bloodborne works differently compared to the traditional blocking mechanic. To execute a parry, you fire your gun just as an enemy is about to land a hit. If timed correctly, this interrupts their attack and put them in a staggered state, leaving them vulnerable. While an enemy is staggered, you can follow up with a visceral attack, a powerful move performed by landing a light attack on the staggered enemy. Visceral attacks can deal massive damage and can often turn the tide of the battle. Staggering enemies can be achieved in two ways. First is the firearm, interrupting an enemy's attack with a well-timed shot. 2. Charge attacks from behind. Landing a fully charged attack on an enemy from behind will stagger them, functioning similar to the backstab mechanic in Dark Souls. However, unlike simply positioning yourself behind an enemy and using a light attack, Bloodborne requires more effort and precision. The charge attack must be carefully timed and executed, as any delay or miscalculation can give the enemy enough time to recover and retaliate, punishing reckless attempts. This adds an extra layer of skill and risk to the process. These mechanics reward precision and timing, encouraging an aggressive and reactive playstyle. The evasion mechanic changes based on whether you are locked into an enemy or not. When locked on, pressing the evade button or the surface button performs a quick step dodge, allowing for precise directional movement to evade attacks. However, when you are not locked on, the same button performs a roll, which covers more distance but is less precise. While this dual functionality makes sense in the context of the game design, I am not particularly a fan of having both rolling and jumping tied to the same button. That said, I understand why the developers chose this approach. It streamlines the control schemes and keeps the combat fluid. Despite my minor preference, it doesn't hinder my overall experience with the game. In Bloodborne, the melee weapons are referred to as trick weapons and are a defining feature of the game's combat system. Each trick weapon has two distinct forms that can be transformed mid-battle, effectively doubling the player's arsenal without needing to switch weapons. This transformation is not just cosmetic, but also significantly alters the weapon's range, speed, and damage output, allowing for a dynamic combat strategies. Take the saw cleaver as an example. In its standard form, it's a compact, short-range weapon that delivers rapid attacks, ideal for crowd control or dispatching weaker enemies quickly. However, when transformed, the saw cleaver extends into a long-ranged weapon, delivering slower but more powerful strikes, capable of staggering tougher foes. That said, while the saw cleaver is undeniably iconic, the threaded cane stands out as the slickest and the most stylish weapon in the game. There is something inherently captivating about its design, a gentleman's cane that transforms into a deadly bladed whip. It's a perfect blend of elegance and lethality, fitting seamlessly into the gothic horror atmosphere. One of the standout features of a trick weapon is that their transformation can seamlessly integrated into combos. For instance, light trick weapon or light trick weapon. Ending a combo with a transformation attack not only switches the weapon to its alternate form, but also deals extra damage compared to the standard attack combo. This mechanic allows skilled players to chain attacks fluidly and adapt to the changing combat situations. However, there is a trade off. Trick weapon combos require commitment. Enemies can interrupt these sequence of hit stunts, leaving you vulnerable if mistimed. This risk-reward dynamic encourages strategic timing and precise execution, adding depth to the combat system. All the combat options I described so far are tied to one of Bloodborne's most unique and defining features, the rally mechanic. This system allows player to recover lost health by striking enemies shortly after taking damage. When you are hit, a portion of your lost health is temporarily highlighted on your health bar. During this small window, landing attacks on an enemy restores the highlighted portion of your health, effectively rewarding an aggressive playstyle. The rally mechanic perfectly embodies Bloodborne's core philosophy, what I like to call this system encourages players to maintain aggression even when wounded by allowing them to regain a lost health through quick counterattacks. However, it's understandable why new players might panic and retreat when their health gets dangerously low. They instinctively prioritize playing it safe. Take this scenario as an example. I'm fighting a boss and it takes away more than half of my health in a single attack. My first instinct might be to back off and heal, fearing that another hit will kill me. Naturally, I dodge and roll backwards to create space, but often bosses follow up with a thrust, charge, or lunge attack that punishes this retreat. In situations like these, sidestepping or rolling sideways proves far more effective rather than retreating backwards. While this isn't always the case, it happens often enough to reinforce the lesson. So, coming back to the rally mechanic, visceral attacks can instantly replenish a significant portion of lost health if timed correctly, leveraging the rally mechanic to its fullest. This synergy occurs because the damage inflicted during a visceral attack is treated as a powerful form of counteroffense, allowing the player to recover lost health in prior exchanges. By staggering an enemy, whether through a well-timed firearm parry or a precise placed charge attack, hunters create an opening to deliver a visceral strike, simultaneously dealing immense damage and regaining vitality. But managing the rally mechanic effectively requires more than just charging back in. It's not always possible to regain health, especially if you already depleted your stamina. Every action in this game, attacking, dodging, running, consumes stamina. And if you are low on both health and stamina, attempting to rally can be risky and might leave you open to further punishment. In these situations, it's better to retreat briefly and use blood vials to heal. The key to mastering the rally system lies in balancing aggression with resource management, ensuring you have enough stamina to capitalize on opportunities without putting yourself in unnecessary danger. This delicate balance makes the combat both thrilling and strategic, pushing players to adapt and overcome the relentless challenges the game throws at them. Speaking of resource management, blood vials and quicksilver bullets are the two primary consumable resources in Bloodborne. Unlike reusable healing items in other Souls games, these are finite resources that can run out entirely. Blood vials are used to restore health, essential for survival. Quicksilver bullets powers the firearm, used for range attacks and parrying. When you run out of these items, you have to replenish your stock in the old-fashioned way. Killing the enemies often wields blood vials and quicksilver bullets as the drops, and you can buy using blood echoes, the game's primary currency, provided that you have enough. At first, this system didn't cause much trouble for me, but when I got stuck on a particularly challenging boss fight, I'm looking at you, Lawrence, it became a real issue. I burned through almost all my blood vials during repeated attempts, leaving me with none for further fight. Farming for resources or spending precious blood echoes to restock added another level of challenge. I'll delve more into that experience shortly. The blood bullet mechanic in Bloodborne highlights the game's theme of sacrifice and power. Providing a unique way to manage resources while staying aggressive. By pressing up on the D-pad, players sacrifice about 30% of their health to gain 5 blood bullets, which are used before the regular quicksilver bullets. This ensures the firearm and the hunter's tools remain available even when your inventory is low. That last 30% of the health can be recovered through blood vials or the rally mechanic, encouraging an offensive playstyle. Blood bullets are particularly valuable in prolonged fight, enabling continuous use of guns for parrying or arcane tools like Augur of Eberitis, aka the hentai shotgun.
And I love you, random citizen.
However, overusing them can leave you vulnerable, so careful timing and recovery are essential. Last but not the least, the hunter tools and items in Bloodborne offer a surprisingly depth of mechanic. Even if I haven't explored all of them extensively, I'll share my experience with the ones I found useful. First, beasts are naturally vulnerable to fire, making the torch an invaluable tool early on. There is an improved version, the Hunter's Torch, which not only serves as a source of light but also stuns beast enemies, making them easier to deal with. While the torch technically doesn't count as a tool, its practical benefits are undeniable. Kin enemies, on the other hand, are weaker to bolt, and the game offers two different papers, fire and bolt, that allows you to imbue your weapons with corresponding elemental properties. These come in handy during tougher fights. Poison knives are another useful tools, applying gradual poison damage to enemies, and the empty phantasm shell adds an arcane buff to your weapons, which feels great when fighting enemies with arcane weakness. And I already talked about the hentai shotgun. Then there is the satisfying physics of the oil and fire combo. Throw oil on an enemy and then follow up with a fire for a devastating damage. It's a straightforward yet engaging mechanic. Finally, there is the blood gem system. Attaching gems to your weapons allows you to customize their properties, like adding elemental damage or making them scale better with specific stats. You can even use cursed gems, which offers increased stats at the cost of debuffs, adding a layer of risk versus reward. While these mechanics might seem overwhelming at first glance, these add a level of strategy and depth that feels rewarding to engage with. It is a subtle system, but it greatly enhances the way you approach the combat. Mastering these systems is the key of surviving in this fast-paced, unforgiving battles in this game. Now that I explained the combat mechanics, let's talk about the things that happen in the game. I'll talk about the boss battles first while I'm at it. Honestly speaking, I hate the kind of bosses who are too bigger than my size. It can be summarized as pretty much the majority of the bosses in this game. It's nothing to do about how hard it is. It's about inconvenience. The problem with giant bosses is that it never engaged me enough. In reality, I am just hacking its legs all the time. I can't see where the incoming attack is supposed to come. How am I going to react if I don't see where it's coming from? And the camera doesn't help either. Most of you can relate where you can get cornered by the boss and you can't get out from there. The camera gets zoomed inside your character, then you can't see anything and the boss kills you. It doesn't happen often, but whenever that happens, it's very annoying. Hitboxes plays a pivotal role in combat experience, influencing how damage is dealt and received. The game uses two primary types of hitboxes. First, the hurt boxes, areas where the entity can be hit, and then secondly, the attack hitboxes, areas where the entity's attack will deal damage, such as the weapon swings or the boss limbs. However, the game's hitbox design often blurs these boundaries, leading to frustrating moments where I get punished for being near to enemies without any clear indication of an attack. This is especially prevalent with the large bosses like Vicar Lawrence and the One Reborn, whose movement itself can trigger damage, even without a visible attack. These bosses feature movement damage hitboxes, where their size and momentum causes harm during seamlessly harmless movements like repositioning or turning, making the player's positioning crucial. The chaotic and often unclear hitbox design forces me into a trial and error approach, where I must learn through frustration rather than clarity. This design philosophy is in stark contrast to the games like Sekiro and Elden Ring, where hitboxes are more precise and visually telegraphed, allowing players to better anticipate the attacks. In Bloodborne, however, the hitboxes of bosses like Lawrence and the One Reborn can often feel unfair, as players are hit by incidental movement without clear visual feedback, which can make fight feel more punishing than challenging. While this contributes to the game's overall tension and immersive risk, it also creates moments where players are punished for simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I'm not trying to compare Bloodborne directly with Sekiro or Elden Ring. After all, Bloodborne is a 10-year-old game, so that wouldn't be entirely fair. However, my point is that FromSoft has clearly refined their design over the years, particularly in terms of hitboxes and combat mechanics. These improvements in their newer titles makes me appreciate the advancement in gameplay. And it makes me hopeful that with a remaster or remake of Bloodborne, we could see these older systems get polished and enhanced, making for an even better experience. I should just be keep dreaming before that ever happens. From my perspective, Father Gascoigne, Germung, Lady Maria, and Orphan of Kos stands out as the best fight in Bloodborne, surpassing the rest of the roster. I genuinely had a great time battling these bosses. Gascoigne serves as the perfect gateway boss, introducing players to the game's aggressive combat and parrying mechanic, while carrying a tragic narrative that mirrors the player's potential fate. This duel feels personal, while precise hitboxes and attacks that rewards skillful play. Gehrman, the first hunter, delivers a climatic and an emotional finale, combining fluid and beautifully animated combat with themes of sacrifice and freedom, making him fight both mechanically satisfying and narratively impactful. Lady Maria, a fan favorite from the DLC, offers an exhilarating encounter with seamless phaser transitions, fast but fair attacks, and a backstory that resonates deeply with the game's lore. Her battle, set against this stunning backdrop of the astral clock tower and accompanied by haunting music, feels almost operatic in its execution. The Orphan of Kos, on the other hand, stands out as the ultimate challenge, with chaotic and unpredictable attacks that pushes player to their limits. His fight encapsulates the tragedy of the DLC's story, emphasizing the consequences of the hunter's actions, while his dynamic second phase amplifies the tension. These fights excel because of their humanoid nature, making their movement and hitboxes more predictable and intuitive compared to the spawning chaos of larger bosses. They feel like duels relying on skill, timing, and precision rather than overwhelming power or spectacle. Additionally, their strong narrative and emotional connection to the game's theme of loss, tragedy, and that cyclical nature of the hunt make these encounters feel meaningful and personal. Let's talk about Lawrence, the first vicar. This fight is the epitome of why I have such a strong dislike for large bosses in Bloodborne. It is undeniably difficult, and not in a good, rewarding way. If I don't dodge his attacks with perfect timing, I'll get stun locked and get killed almost instantly. My frustration with oversized bosses can be traced directly back to Lawrence. But as much as I despised fighting him, what really drives me insane that his constant screaming. Why won't he just shut up? It's relentless. Just listen to him screeching. It's enough to make you lose focus entirely. And when you finally die, which you inevitably will, multiple times, the loading screen afterwards feels like the calm after the storm. Blissfully quiet and peaceful. I've actually gone into the game's settings to turn down the sound just so I can fight this boss without losing my mind from the endless noise. That's how unbearable his screaming is. And it's not just Lawrence. Amelia and the cleric beast are just as bad with their screeching. Why has no one pointed this out yet? It's a mystery to me because of their constant howling, it's equally insufferable. Just because these bosses are beasts doesn't mean that their sound design should be a non-stop barrage of screeching. And there is the hitboxes, which are another reasons why I can't stand Lawrence. I already mentioned my issue with the hitboxes on larger bosses, but Lawrence take this to a whole new level of aggravation. His massive frame and exaggerated attacks often feel inconsistent and unfair half the time. And it's like I'm getting hit by something that shouldn't have connected. It completely disrupts the flow of the fight, making it feel more like a chore than a challenge. At the end of the day, I'm never fighting this boss again. The frustration from his screaming, the unfair hitboxes, and the overall experience just isn't worth it. He is a nightmare in every sense of the word, and not in a kind of challenge I enjoy. Lawrence is the perfect example of how big bosses in this game can go horribly wrong. As I said before, I don't have problems with bosses being hard. I have problems with bosses that are inconvenient. And nothing screams of inconvenience like that wreck to a boss fight after dying. Murder Logarius is the perfect example of this. You spawn at the lantern, which is all the way at the entrance of Cainhurst Castle. First, after unlocking the shortcut, you ride the elevator up, then you have to send it back down to save time for your next run if you get killed. Next, you dodge the ghost ladies that attack you in the library, then climb up a ladder, go up to the stairs, avoid a vampire looking enemy at the terrace, jump down to a lower platform, and do it again on a balancing section, and land on another roof, and climb yet another ladder before you finally reach the boss. And naturally, you'll need to learn the boss's pattern to beat him. I'm all for that. Figuring out how to overcome a challenge is a part of the fun. What I'm not here for is to dying and having to respawn at the lantern very start of this exhausting route. Why? The run back to Logarius every single time is long, repetitive, and downright tedious. It feels like the game is extending its difficulty artificially and not through the fight itself, but through the grind of getting back to it. While the fight is a challenge, the process of reaching him is the real frustration. So, no, I did it once and I'm not climbing up on that fucking terrace again. But wait, do you know what's the absolute worst? Mikolash. Why is this guy a mandatory boss? Lawrence and Logarius were tough, sure, but at least they're optional. It's up to me whether I want to face them or not. Mikolash, on the other hand, is forced on me. And it's just the most frustrating and unnecessary encounter in the game. It's not even a proper gimmick boss fight. In my first playthrough, this fight was pathetic, chasing him around a maze, dealing with his puppet minions. But in New Game Plus, it becomes outright unbearable. His second phase, especially when he casts a call beyond, this is where everything falls apart. Sure, I know I can dodge forward just the right time to avoid it or shoot him from a distance to interrupt the cast. I also know I can dodge his auger attacks. But what am I actually learning from all this? Practically nothing. In a regular boss fight, I am analyzing patterns, avoiding moves, and figuring out when to attack during an opening. That's the core of the Bloodborne's experience. In New Game Plus, I take the knowledge I gained and use it to adapt to this upscaled difficulty to those bosses. But with Mikolash, there is no meaningful learning curve. In my first playthrough, I didn't learn anything. So, when I reached him in New Game Plus, his upscaled Call Beyond just wipes me instantly. It's unfair and it's infuriating. This fight doesn't challenge me in any satisfying way. It's clunky, it's tedious, and it feels like it's there to waste my time rather than test my skills. For a mandatory boss, Mikolash is an absolute low point in Bloodborne. The rest of the bosses in Bloodborne, they are fine, I suppose. I haven't really felt the need to mention them because for most of the part, I was able to defeat them on my first or second try. Ludwig is often regarded as one of the best fights in Bloodborne. For me, the challenge should come from the fight itself and not from repeating long, repetitive tricks or dealing with obnoxious sound design. But overall, the majority of the bosses in this game are well designed and challenging in a way that feels fair, with only a few that crosses the line into the kind of frustration that leaves me dreading in every encounter. So I gotta say it first. Back in 2022, I got my hands on Bloodborne and I played it till I kill the blood-starved beast. Then life happened. So I just had to put down the game and didn't touch my PlayStation 4 for 2 years until the Concord disaster happened. I see everywhere people have genuine hate. Sony already owes the Bloodborne IP, so why they aren't doing anything with it? Let's just get back to the story then. It starts off simple. Something happened to these town folks. They became a lynch mob and started killing anyone who is a beast and can't distinguish between who's foe and who's friend. That explains the hostility. So, it's a werewolf type scenario. The people are transforming into beasts, and the player is the hunter, and it's the job of the hunter to put down the beasts that are in its path. Since Bloodborne is set in the Victorian era, you might think it's a deep exploration of British history. And as someone of an Indian origin, I'll be lying if I said there wasn't a certain therapeutic satisfaction in the cutting through an entire lynch mob. Hey, quick edit. Yeah, you probably get where I was going with that. I have a lot to say about colonialism, but that's in a whole other discussion. This video, however, is about Bloodborne. And while my earlier statement rings true in some ways, my focus here is on the game, not on unpacking historical events. Yeah, I'm getting sidetracked. So let's just get back to the story.
But first,
The level design in Bloodborne is largely defined by its clever use of shortcuts, which streamlines exploration and reduces backtracking. These shortcuts, like gates, ladders, and levers, linked distant areas, making navigation more efficient. For example, the gate in Central Yharnam that leads to the Cleric Beast can be unlocked early on, giving players quicker access to important areas after death or future explorations. This design encourages discovery as hidden paths and connections between areas often reveal themselves unexpectedly, creating a seamless and cohesive world. Shortcuts not only save time but also enhances the sense of progression and reward curiosity. The interconnectedness is something I genuinely appreciate, and it creates a satisfying sense of exploration. However, the design of the lanterns just before the boss fight should be different from this interconnected path. Let me provide with an example. Dark Souls 2 is infamous for its long runbacks to bosses. I never even played Dark Souls 2, but I've heard enough to know how frustrating that design choice can be. The same issue arises with Martyr Logaris. The bosses themselves should present a challenge based on their mechanics, not the tedious run back to the boss fight after each death. Then again, I'm actively not trying to compare the old games with the new one. But I said this before and I'll say it again. The frustration I faced is resolved in the newer titles. So, me talking about the bad experience are just limited to Bloodborne only. This doesn't mean I didn't enjoy the game. Now that I explained what I like and dislike about this game, I'll talk about my story experience. When I started the game, German greets me in the Hunter's Dream, offers me more than just a simple welcome. He shares a crucial insight into the twisted reality of Bloodborne, explaining the nature of the hunt, the cosmic forces at play, and his own tragic fate as the previous caretaker of the dream. German also introduces me to my waifu, the doll, who serves as more than just a comforting presence. She is the one who allows me to level up, aiding me on my journey by using the blood echoes I have gained to enhance my abilities. I return to the clinic, but the room where I once spawned is now locked. Dr. Yosefka is no longer allowing anyone inside, which, given the circumstance, is somewhat understandable. After that, I met Gilbert, a kind man, holding up in his home near the central Yarnum lantern. He spoke with a frail voice, already succumbing to illness, but offered guidance and even gifted me a flamethrower if I helped him. He seemed resigned to his fate, telling me to continue my journey. When I revisited him later, his voice weaker than before. I also met another person named Aline, who is a fellow hunter, and she's a part of Hunter faction, a mysterious group who seeks to stop other hunters who have gone too far into madness or became a danger to others. As I made my way through Yarnum, I climbed out of the sewers and opened a gate, where I met a young girl. She was waiting for her parents to come home, clutching a music box her mother had given her, a melody that calmed her father in troubled times. She asked me to find them, and I promised I would. What I didn't realize how intertwined our fates would become. Eventually, I discovered the horrifying truth. Her father was Gascoigne, a hunter overcome by bloodlust, unable to resist the beast within. Worse, he had killed his wife, mistaking her for a monster. Confronting him was inevitable, and as he succumbed entirely into his transformation, I had to put him down. It was a tragic encounter, made even more painful by the realization that I couldn't save the family. The little girl's hope, her music box, and her plea for help were all I had left as a reminder of Yarnum's cruel, unrelenting nature. When I first reached the Odin Chapel, the inhabitant there asked me to bring survivors, clearly showing a genuine intent to save them. It felt like he was still holding on to some semblance of humanity, trying to help others in a world gone mad. But then I returned to Yosefka's clinic, expecting the usual, and she asked me to bring survivors. It was almost as if her tone had changed entirely, now carrying an unsettling playfulness that didn't sit right with me. That sudden shift in her attitude made me stop and think, why the change? What happened in between that made her, who once seemed like an concerned figure, now speaks with such strange amusement? It's these subtle but unsettling shifts in character that made me realize nothing is quite what it seems in this world. Then it hit me. I could tell the girl to seek sanctuary at Odin Chapel. It felt like it's the safest option at that time, and I decided it was better not to reveal the tragic fate of her parents. But little did I know, she chose the sewer path instead, believing it would be safer. That decision led her directly into the jaws of the man-eater pig that prowled the sewers. When I discovered what had happened, the weight of my actions settled heavily on me. A literal guilt trip. Later, Henrik, a fellow hunter and father-in-law to Gascoigne, went mad after the loss of his family. Overcome by grief, he became a danger to others. Eileen was tasked with putting him down. Her role highlights the tragic cycle of the hunt, where even those try to protect others are drawn into the madness. For anyone experiencing this story for the first time, the realization is haunting. The hunter's choices, well meaning or not, directly contribute to the downfall of an entire family. A father consumed by bloodlust, a mother slain by his hand, and a daughter lost to the horrors of Yarnum. It's a grim reminder that in this world, even hope can lead to tragedy. But there are others I can save. The old lady seeking shelter from the hunt, Ariana, the prostitute, and the nun, Adele, who was kidnapped and brought to the Hyporian jail. Jail, jail. Gown?
Why is everything in English said differently than it's written? Make us feel stupid?
Oh, you're asking the wrong feller.
I brought all of them to the chapel, hoping they'd be safe. Meanwhile, I sent the liar and the cannibal to the clinic, thinking I was doing the right thing. I mean, I offered the liar a safe haven and he refused.
I offered you friendship, and you spat in my face.
As for the cannibal, well, it was obvious to keep him away from everyone else. Sending them to the clinic seems like the safest choice for everyone involved. But in hindsight, it all felt I was unknowingly playing a part in a twisted, dark game, where every decision only led me deeper into the horrors of Yarnum. Little did I realize the clinic was no sanctuary. My attempts to help only fed into the city's unending nightmare. As if the fate of the Yarnum's inhabitant was sealed no matter what I did. So, like when I said the game felt more like werewolf hunting, I was completely wrong. After defeating Amelia, the world shifted into nighttime. Now, I had to go to the woods and opened a door using a password I had acquired. Wait, if you are dead, and who opened the door for me? After making my way through the woods, I came across a cave. Then I climbed a ladder and bam, I was back in central Yanam. Nice touch. And then I got access to Yosefka's clinic through the window. And that's when I saw it. The blue creature. This alien-like being. Something I had never seen before. That's when I realized, okay, now I'm officially entered into the cosmic horror territory of this game. Up until then, I had been fighting beasts, human turned into monsters. But when I saw that creature, it hit me hard. Cosmic forces are far beyond my comprehension, are now at play. So I connected the dots. The real Yosefka is dead, and this impostor is the one transforming the people I sent earlier into those horrifying blue alien-like creatures. But it doesn't stop there. At Bergenworth Manor, I saw the same kind of transformation, a bipedal creature with a fly like head and frenzy inducing attacks. It hit me with the same shock value as when I first saw the blue creatures at Yosefka's clinic. I later learned that Bergenworth was the place where all these experiments started, setting everything in motion. When a Rom dies, it feels like the wall between a reality and a nightmare starts to blur. Amidst this chaos, a woman in pure white dress appears, bleeding from her abdomen. At the same time, the red moon phase begins, and all the survivors are driven to madness. Ariana writhes in pain. The old lady takes sedatives to calm herself, and Adele has completely lost her mind. The imposter is in a doggy position, which honestly I couldn't help but think, why? I mean, anyways, by doing so, I acquired umbilical cord, a key item in all this madness. And as all this unfolds, I hear a baby crying faintly from a distance. The crying had started during the night phase, but it became unmistakable when the blood moon phase kicked in. But now, something else also happens. Now, I can see them, the eldritch horror. The arachnid like creatures perched on top of the building, silently observing me. These creatures, known as the amygdala, had been there all along, watching me from the shadows. Before, I couldn't see them due to my low insight, but after the blood moon phase, they all became visible. They just sat there,
Menacingly!
looming over the city like ominous, silent watchers. Their presence sending a chill down my spine. It felt as though they were always a step ahead, waiting for the right moment to make their move. For some reason, I decided to return to Central Yarnum. Despite the horrifying atmosphere, I couldn't help but to admire the sky. It actually looked beautiful. I went back for a quiet stroll, but that's when I discovered Gilbert had transformed into a beast, and so it fell to me to lay him to rest. This was an interesting encounter, so I decided to return to Gascoigne's house, expecting nothing more than the lingering echoes of a past horror. But there, in the midst of desolation, I found something unexpected. An older sister, someone I hadn't seen before. She had returned during the blood moon phase, asking about the whereabouts of her younger sister. After giving her the ribbon, she learned the tragic fate of the girl and snapped. The giggling in her hysteria was chilling. Later, I found her dead at the bottom of the ladder, a tragic fate mirroring that of her sister. What bothers me though is the sudden appearance of the older sister. Where had she been all this time? Even if I'm to believe she went out searching for her father, since her mother never returned. What had been she doing throughout the night? Her sudden reappearance and subsequent descent into madness only add to the unsettling atmosphere to the situation. After acquiring the key to the upper cathedral, I arrived at the orphanage and immediately noticed the deformed, worm like creatures crawling around. It hit me. Are these the children? Could they be the byproduct of whatever horrific experiments were conducted here? Whatever happened in this place, it's clear that no one has control over it anymore. I entered the orphanage through a side entrance and saw a grand hall from the upper floor. But as I descended the stairs, the chandelier suddenly crashed into the ground, plunging the place into eerie darkness. That's when three wolves with glowing blue eyes ambushed me. It was a good scare, I'll admit, but I can't stand this area, mainly because it's filled with brain suckers that steals insight. Eventually, I came across the same blue alien life form I had seen before, only to face this celestial emissary in the next room. I see now. The alien like enemies are called kin, and whatever transformed those children into deformed creatures, these kin are now continuing the cycle by creating more of their own kind. The nightmare doesn't stop, it only grows darker with every revelation. After taking the elevator down, I encountered Eberitis, daughter of the cosmos, residing beneath the church in the dark depth of the altar of despair. The healing church exploited her blood for these experiments, granting miraculous healing properties, but ultimately transforming the recipients into monstrous beings. Now she mourns a petrified figure at the altar, a poignant image of sorrow and isolation. Her presence serves as a haunting reminder of the church's unchecked ambition and hubris, which led not to salvation but to its inevitable corruption and downfall. But continuing my journey, after navigating through the nightmare, I encountered a creature, a human figure, but with a grotesquely disfigured head. Suddenly, my frenzy gauge started to fill up for no reason. Hey yo, what the fuck?
Hey! Hey!
I was barely able to register what was happening. This creature was able to inflict frenzy just by making eye contact. I was killed instantly. That was my introduction to the Winterlanders. Before this, I always thought that the basilisks from the Dark Souls were the worst. Their missed attack that would kill me instantly were terrifying, but I was wrong. This creature took the crown of instant death. We have a new champion. When I entered the nightmare realm from the other side, I was instantly attacked by the same frenzy inducing assault from the winter lanterns. But they weren't there. This time, the attack came from a distant window from a far off building. It dawned on me later that this was the manifestation of all the brains of the Winter Lantern combined. A terrifying force that I couldn't see directly but could still feel its presence. But something else caught my attention. The baby's cries were louder and more distinct now, signaling I was getting closer. And then I saw her again, the woman in white. She seemed to be yearning for something, or perhaps yearning for the baby. Could it be hers? After that eerie elevator ride, I faced Margot's wet nurse, the boss that intrinsically tied to the crying baby. This spectral being appeared to be protecting the child, and it became my duty to put it down. Upon defeating the wet nurse, the scream displayed nightmare slain, and the cries of the baby abruptly stopped. And as a reward, I received the second umbilical cord. When I returned, the woman in white bowed to me, a quiet, solemnly gesture of gratitude before she vanishes. Back at the cathedral ward, I noticed Ariana wasn't in her usual spot. A trail of blood led me to the flooded room beneath the chapel. There, I found her cradling a deformed baby, the same grotesque kind of creature I had seen at the orphanage. Ariana, visibly traumatized, sat silently, overcome by her ordeal. I realized she must have been a victim of the blood experiments. Her sudden pregnancy, an unnatural result of this transfusion. As a hunter, my first instincts screamed to act, to kill anything monstrous. A part of me hesitated, pleading,
Not the kid.
but another, more primal part, whispered.
A hunter must hunt.
I attacked the malformed creature. As it died, Ariana fell into the shock and passed away. Her tragic end was another grim reminder of the horrors of blood experiments and of the fine line between hunter and monster. I got the third umbilical cord after this. When I returned to the hunter's dream, I was greeted with the unsettling sight of the workshop burning. The doll, with her usual calm demeanor, told me that a government was waiting for me. And when I finally confronted him, he offered me an option to wake up from the nightmare and forget everything, the tragedy, the horror, and the madness. It was an end. But it came at a cost. My death. In my playthrough, I didn't realize that this was a branching path. I thought if I refused, Gearman would say simply something like, "Let me know whenever you're ready." Much like how NPCs in the game would brush off if my refusal with the phrase like, "some other time then." So I thought the same thing when I accepted Gearman's offer. I unknowingly chose the first ending of the game. But as the credits rolled, I was left with a sinking feeling. No, stop. I thought I haven't seen everything yet. I haven't experienced Bloodborne to its fullest. Did I miss the DLC? Was there more to uncover? That ending, the one where I wake up, left me feeling incomplete. There has to be more to this nightmare. More of the world. More to the story. I feel like I had barely scratched the surface. You know what? I'll experience it fully. New Game Plus. I've already mentioned how tough the bosses were, so I won't delve into that. But it was definitely a different experience this time around. The amygdala outside the Odin Chapel transports me directly to the DLC area, a twisted, warped version of the cathedral ward. The familiar cityscape is now consumed by an otherworldly, mold like substance that has solidified, creating a grotesque pathway. This strange growth engulfs the entire city, transforming it into an unsettling version of itself. Here, the enemies are hunters from the past, a fascinating and a challenging change. This area immediately gave me the impression of I shouldn't be here. It feels far more hostile than the familiar cathedral ward from the base game. The game enforces its unsettling atmosphere by significantly upscaling the enemy hunters, making each encounter a brutal test of skill and survival. As I explored, I realized I was inside a familiar house in Central Yonam. I spotted an old man in a wheelchair, sitting in the exact same spot as in the base game. Immediately, I suspected a trap. There was an item right in front of him, and he seemed to be guarding it, thinking I was smart. I'll attack him first, but wait, he's already dead. Shrugging it off, I went to collect the item. Wait, what's that? Holy shit. The wheelchair guy exploded. It totally caught me off guard. You know what this reminds me of? This was actually a well executed scare and a clever trap. Not because I managed to evade it, because I still fell for it. I noticed that some enemies wield a segmented, detachable blade that looked incredibly badass. After some research, I found out this weapon is called the Beast Cutter. Naturally, I was excited to try it out myself. However, once I got my hands on it, the weapon felt sluggish and underwhelming, lacking the speed and fluidity I had hoped for. Now that I think about it, this design feels oddly familiar. Yes. But when I finally got my hands on the Holy Moonlight Sword, I didn't immediately appreciate how good this weapon is. Not only it's fun to use with its diverse attack options, but I can also literally throw the enemies with its charge blasts. You know what's the most aesthetically pleasing and outright badass weapon in the game? I don't care who you are never changing my mind about this. As I moved forward, I came across a dried up river of blood, and following this path led me to Ludwig's boss fight arena. But what really caught my attention was the grim sight behind it. The river's cause became apparent. Countless corpses skinned and piled high, their blood forming this ghastly stream. Along the pile, one skinned figure was still alive, desperately banging against the bar of the locked gate with whatever strength it had left. As horrifying this scene was, I couldn't help but to see a deeper reflection in it, a metaphor for how society often molds us. The relentless struggle, the desperation, and the feeling of being trapped resonate far beyond this nightmarish setting. It's a thought-provoking image. And sure, it's a game, but it hits differently when you start drawing parallels to real life, like the grind and burnout people endure in systems that just chew them up and spit them out. Moments like this stick with you, and not just because of the horror, but because of how disturbingly relatable they feel. The old hunters, especially those tied to the healing church, did exploit Kos, the Great One. Kos was once a revered and a powerful entity worshipped by the fishing-handed inhabitants. However, the hunters and the church had their own dark interest in Kos and its blood. The old hunters, driven by their obsession with blood and the power of the Great One, sought to exploit Kos's blood for immortality and other forbidden abilities. In the fishing hamlet, they slaughtered its inhabitant and killed Kos in their pursuit of power. The Healing Church's blood administration, with its focus on blood transfusions and rituals, was rooted in a quest to harness the ability of the Great One. Kos's death was marked as a significant turning point, as it unleashes the curse of the Great One's blood, leading to the transformation of the fishing hamlet and its people. The old hunters, in their greed and ambition, unknowingly brought a series of catastrophic consequences. So basically, in the DLC, I'm cleaning up everyone's mess. The Healing Church never stopped pushing their experiments, and their reckless actions set off a chain of horror in Yharnam. When I reached the point where I had to speak to German again, I knew what I had to do. This time, I consumed all the umbilical cords before facing him. With those absorbed, I refused his offer. And then, when it happened, the final fight, the true culmination of everything I had experienced up to that point. The battle against German, he was no longer an old man offering peace. He had become the embodiment of the twisted world I had to come to understand. And after his death, a new entity emerged, the Moon Presence. It had been controlling German all along, and now it sought into a new host, finding the hunter to be a suitable candidate. Here's the difference lies. This time, I had consumed the umbilical cords. I have gained the strength to resist the Moon Presence bonding and fight back. By defeating it, the hunter would become the new infant Great One. But if I hadn't consumed the cords, I would have been taken German's place, becoming the new guide for all the hunters to come, initiating a new cycle of nightmare.
And so, the hunt begins again.
Now that I think about it, the ending where I woke up makes more sense. After all the madness, the grotesque, the transformation, and the existential horrors of the hunt, waking up from the nightmare offers a sense of closure. It's the escape from an endless cycle of suffering, even if it's bittersweet.
Farewell, good hunter. May you find your worth in the waking world.
Wait, am I forgetting something? Oh yeah, the Chalice Dungeons. These dungeons are essentially Bloodborne's take on dungeon crawler. You could explore the depth, unlock gates, and search for hidden treasures, fighting a boss at the end of each level, and repeat this process 2 or 3 more times, depending upon the chalice you've chosen. It's a grind but a rewarding experience to witness unused enemies. Though honestly, I just don't have it in me to finish these anytime soon. I'll take my sweet time with it. I genuinely loved this game, and it will stay with me for months, even years. I do have my fair share of problem with it, but what it presents far outweighs the moment I struggled with. Honestly, this was my first dive into Lovecraftian horror. And now I want to explore the cosmic horror genre more, which is why I picked up Fear and Hunger. I'll see where this journey takes me. I thought I'll be able to make more. I'll be more regular with this, but life happens. I feel drained these past few months, and I haven't had the time to create as much as I like. I just can't take out time for myself either, but I'm trying. So, If you like what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later. Peace.